Well, David spends the first 7 verses really just throwing himself onto God, putting himself at the mercy of God's judgment. Hear the right. Verse 2, let my sentence come forth from thy presence. Verse 3, you have proved my heart. You've tried me. I've kept me from the paths of the destroyer. Hold up my goings. I've called upon you. Show me your loving kindness. He's begging God and praying to God to hear him, to try him, to purify him, to prove him. Now he says in verse 8 to keep him. Keep me as the apple of thine eye. Of the eye. Hide me under the shadow of thy wings, from the wicked that oppress me, from my deadly enemies who compass me about. Now in verses 8 and forward, he's going to really be expressing to God how dependent he is on God's intervention, okay? Keep me, deliver me, intervene, God. Get in the middle of this. Prevent my enemies. He sees himself as vulnerable and potentially easily overpowered. And aren't we all, when it really comes down to it, okay? Aren't we all individually vulnerable to both external and internal enemies? I talked about yesterday how that there's the enemies that might threaten us from without. There's a spiritual warfare. There's those that would destroy our nation. There's those that hate our Jesus and our gospel. There are those that surely hate God. And there's a satanic spiritual external warfare. But for me, I think the greater threats are right before me and right within me. It reminds me of that famous statement, "Sir, we have seen the enemy and he is us," which traces back to a couple of historical anecdotes. But I fight my own fear. I fight my own anxiety. I fight my own doubts and internal thoughts. I fight the enemy of my own mind. No doubt we all struggle against enemies from without and from within, and from sin itself. And David understands his vulnerability. He understands that in his weakness, he is totally dependent on God. And so, God, I've called upon you. I'm asking you, keep me at the center of your vision. Keep me protected in the shadow of your wings. He says, the wicked are seeking to oppress me. My deadly enemies, they compass me about. They're surrounding me. They are enclosed in their own fat, their own prosperity, their own material wealth and plenty. From my deadly enemy, with and with their mouth they speak proudly. God, there are people that are flagrant, proud, presumptuous, lifting themselves up against you, against your people, against your truth, against your realities. They've now compassed us in our steps, and they've set their eyes bowing down to the earth. The whole passage here is describing, in fact, in the next verse, like as a lion crouching down, plotting, planning. If we let that seep into us, it might scare us a little bit, that we live in a world where, as God's people, there are truly, legitimately enemies. This truly is a spiritual battle. Now, there's one thing I want to say about that spiritual battle that we learn about in the New Testament. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. So he's a big blowhard. He's a defeated enemy. And basically, Satan and his cohorts have only as much power as we grant them, only as much power as we give them. I don't spend a lot of time thinking about the devil or demons or their influence around me or in me or within me or their attempt to have influence within me, because I'm the child of the reigning king. I'm a child of the winning king. So they're already defeated. I don't see that they really have that much power in my life. The power that sin really has in our lives is the power of deception, lying. So that's the only power that really has is the power I grant it, the believability, what belief I give it. And David is casting all of his faith and all of his dependence and all of his belief upon God. But he does realize there's a vulnerability going on. There's a war going on around him. There is risk around him. There are enemies that want to take him down and that are plotting strategically to entrap him, to ensnare him. like a lion greedy of prey, and as it were a young lion lurking in secret places. The image, by the way, of this in a Hebrew mind, especially in the Holy Land, is not even uncommon today in the Holy Land. We were there a couple of years ago before COVID with a group, and we were in the desert outside of Jericho, right where there's a canyon road, a trail that travels up to Jerusalem, where those on foot for centuries would have journeyed to Jerusalem. And the safest way to journey in the Holy Land was to journey with an entourage and to stay with the caravan, to stay together, because in groups you were not so vulnerable to one or two robbers that were lurking, waiting for isolated travelers. There's a lot to be said about that. The Christian life is certainly not a solo journey. You can't be a healthy Christian and be going at it alone. You need a Christian family. You need a church family to be engaging with you and to be walking with you. You need Christian friends to be gathering together with you in prayer and Bible study and spiritual growth. It's better to travel in an entourage with a community of believers. So Satan's always looking for those lone travelers, those stragglers, those that have wandered away from the group. Those are the sheep that always get eaten in the desert, the ones that strayed away. But in the Holy Land, we were there a number of years ago. We stopped at an overlook, this precipice that overlooks this ravine called the Wadi Kelt. It's a dry riverbed that just literally is just a deep ravine that winds up to Jerusalem. Well, even there, okay, when we unloaded the bus, there were dozens of Bedouin shepherds and desert people that were there to sell trinkets and necklaces and keepsakes to tourists, cheap little souvenirs. And I'll never forget, as we stayed with the group, the tour guide even said before we got on the bus, don't spend any time talking to these Bedouins. They're criminal. They will rob you as soon as they'll sell you something. Just stay with the group and walk to the precipice. We're going to have a conversation there. We're going to walk back to the bus, and don't get sidetracked by their wares and their trinkets. Well, I remember a couple of the ladies that were with us, as we were walking back, they got intrigued by the necklaces and the goods that the Bedouins were sharing or were trying to sell. And sure enough, the rest of the group got on the bus. And I looked off the bus, and there were two of the ladies with our group that were completely surrounded by Bedouin salesmen who were alarmingly domineering and dominant and pressing them to buy these necklaces. And they were handing them these things and draping scarves over them. And I mean, it was very aggressive. And as I looked at that situation, I thought those ladies do not know what to do right now. And nobody really saw what was going on. And I jumped off the bus, and this isn't all that heroic. There was a lot of people around, but I just realized if there was not intervention, that these ladies were going to either get money taken or spending money they didn't intend to spend. But I very quickly took the things they were putting onto the ladies and put them back into the hands of the Bedouins. And they didn't even want to take them, so they fell to the ground, which made the Bedouins angry. And as soon as I could, I grabbed the ladies and I turned and I said, let's walk back to the bus very quickly. And we very quickly went out of that group of Bedouins and onto the bus before they could really take action. But for a moment, for a split second, those men were not happy that I had taken their goods from the hands and arms and shoulders of the women and handed them back, and to the point that they dropped on the ground. And as I read this passage, I think of that moment where these two ladies were just surrounded by those men who frankly wanted to take advantage of them, at least economically. David understands this picture because that's how travelers would have been vulnerable in the Holy Land, walking alone on a dark or a lonely desert road, or a wadi, a kind of Celt, a kind of wadi riverbed, would have been a very dangerous thing. And David knows that God is his only hope. So look at verse 13, and we're going to land on verse 13. Arise, O Lord, disappoint him, cast him down, deliver my soul from the wicked, which is thy sword. Now, there's more I want to say about this tomorrow, but suffice to say this: David knows that his greatest hope of deliverance from his enemy is for God to arise, and then the word disappoint. The idea of disappointing him, cast him down, is God, intervene, get in between me and the enemy, and disappoint their purposes, disappoint their intentions, disappoint their plans, and cast them down, completely incapacitate them. Now, my friend, this is what you and I need today, okay? The enemies that are external to us, the temptations, the external threats and vulnerabilities, the enemies that are internal to us, fear, anxiety, doubt, wrong decisions, wrong thinking, self-cynicism, discouragement, on we could go. Why don't you ask your God right now, God, arise, intervene, step in between me and the enemy, and cast it down. And let me today live safely in the confidence of your grace. Hey, happy Tuesday. Have a great day, and we'll see you tomorrow.